Harry's wife. A black view of Harry's wife. Harry's wife has played the race card. This is done by numerous people, but often done by narcissists because it's a convenient way of getting to the prime aims. As I've explained to you previously, the narcissist will, within a range of parameters linked to the type of narcissist that they are, utilize certain means of getting to the prime aims more often than others. So, for instance, with certain narcissists, they will indulge in providing lots of high-quality sex to somebody. In other instances, it'll be playing a victim card the whole time of being picked on. With others, it's turning on the waterworks. With others, it's resorting to physical violence. Naturally, the narcissist has a range of different manipulations that are utilized in differing circumstances in accordance with what's occurring and the type of narcissist that they are. And playing the race card to attempt to control is part of that victim mentality and is done to cause, or at least intends to cause, the recipient of the race card to feel guilty and correct their behaviour so that they submit to the control of the narcissist, provide fuel and potentially some form of residual benefit. As we know, Harry's wife put herself forward as white. That was on a resume and a driving licence, that she declared herself to be Caucasian. And then afterwards we've had the revision of history about the stories about her father telling her to create her own box, even though at the time she was content to place herself within the Caucasian box. The fact that she has done everything to make herself look white and pass herself off as white, for instance, clearly having cosmetic surgery undertaken with regard to the shape and size of her nose, the way that she styles her hair. And she's perfectly entitled to take those steps if she wishes. But of course, then to claim that she's black is not only obviously not the case, but it also is patently ridiculous with regard to the actions. But again, we invariably see with narcissists the incongruity between what she says and what she does. And furthermore, is an insult to black people. She only claims to be black when it suits her, but what has she done for black people? Did she go to the shooting in Buffalo? She was soon enough to go to Uvalde as a mum. But as a person of colour, or a woman of colour, as she often likes to declare herself, she was missing from the shooting at Buffalo, which affected black people, or people of colour, if you want to put it another way. How many black boyfriends has she had? How many black men has she married? None. They're all white. Look at her friends. For the most part, those that she circulated with in Toronto, for example, white. Sure, she's cozied up to some people of colour as of late, attempted to do so with the Obamas, did so for a period of time with Oprah Winfrey, Tyler Perry, etc., but they've all walked away from her for reasons that we know, and it was only because it was convenient for her to now claim that she was a person of colour. Of course, if you criticise her, you're immediately labelled as a racist, which means really she's the racist, as she brings the issue of race into the conversation, where hitherto it wasn't relevant. Her mindless, numbskull supporters play the race card also, utterly incapable of realising that people dislike her for her behaviour, nothing to do with the colour of her skin. Certain individuals who have an agenda utilise her as some form of poster girl for prejudice and unconscious bias, as Harry might say, although unfortunately for them, they end up making themselves look foolish. For example, Trisha Goddard's recent attempt to defend the fact that they clearly insinuated that the royal family were racist and then tried to retract from doing so. Everyone bar a simpleton can see what was being driven at in the Oprah Winfrey interview, and therefore to try and claim thereafter that there was no racism is not only a lie, but is disingenuous. There are many black people who have no truck with Harry's wife. They see straight through her. They recognise her for what she is, a charlatan that utilises the playing of the race card in a manner which is both despicable and contrary to the interests of people of colour, indeed, setting back their own attempts to remedy prejudice and unfair behaviour as a consequence of her commandeering it purely for the pursuit of the prime aims. But I came across a recent article which updates the views about Harry's wife, and it's written from a person of colour, and to see precisely what the current view is from this particular journalist. It's written by Alicia Montgomery a few days ago and appears at slate.com. I thought it would be useful to see what the current view is by a black journalist and to see what it tells us about people's understanding of Harry's wife's narcissism and her use of the race card. Alicia Montgomery writes as follows. In recent weeks, Prince Harry and his best-selling biography Spare have been front and centre in the Sussex Squad's campaign to tell all of us how terrible his obviously broken family is. And while I have no plans to read the memoir, I'm glad that Harry has stepped into that spotlight instead of his wife. He's tough. He can take it. So tough he whinges all of the time, but we'll move on. And that's good, because the reception of Spare and the Sussex's Netflix docuseries has not been wholly positive. As outlets like BuzzFeed, The New York Times and Slate have chronicled, even people who were previously sympathetic to the Sussexes are getting just a little bit tired of the couple's omnipresence these days. Now, that omnipresence, of course, is as a consequence of Harry's wife's need to keep asserting control and nullifying those threats to control, and shows how her mid-range narcissism isn't up to the job to doing it properly. All the exposure has hurt their image. Recently, writer Gloria Allenrue tweeted, I think the sooner we all understand that Harry and his wife are not taking a stance against his colonialist family, but are just upset at not being able to participate in it the way they thought they would be able to, the freer we'll all be. Well, with that observation, that's actually giving a bit of a free pass to the Sussexes to say, if we all adjust our behaviour and realise what it is that they're troubled by, we'll all be okay. Well, actually, it's not as a consequence of that, although she's partially right that there is a reaction to not being able to participate in it the way they thought they would be able to. Primarily more from Harry than from her. Of course, from Harry's wife, as a consequence of it being a threat to control. The article continues, the rest of the world may be catching up now, but as some responses to Lamrue's tweet make clear, black observers of the Sussexes, even those who steadfastly defend them against their haters, have long had complicated feelings about Harry's wife. I count myself among that number. Before that fairy tale marriage, Harry's wife was living a different kind of feminist fairy tale. She was a self-made millionaire, not sure if that was right, just famous enough, who spent her spare time jetting around the world with her divas, wearing cool clothes and doing periodic good deeds, fake empathy. Even though she loudly loves her prince, relationship bulletins, and her kids, relationship bulletins, you can tell, in her interviews and in the Netflix series, that Harry's wife kind of misses her own life. What it really is that she struggles to deal with the repeated threats to her control. And why wouldn't she? Her new life has forced her to face things that she never prepared for. The abuse isn't her fault, but some of the false notes in her response might be. A little context here. I am a proud African-American woman of a certain age, and I care about the British royal family. Like, really care. As in, I have vivid memories of getting up early to watch Princess Diana's wedding on a black and white television, and a couple of years later of rushing to finish my paper route so I could watch Sarah Ferguson's. I've read thousands of pages of Tudor biographies, and when I travelled to Great Britain, it was just to visit historical sites connected to Elizabeth I, like Hampton Court, Westminster Abbey, and the Tower of London. At the Tower, I remember being shoulder to shoulder with other tourists, oohing and ahhing over the crown jewels, when I noticed a South Asian family next to me pointing and smiling at the display, and it hit me. I was someone whose ancestors had their freedom, dignity, and even their lives stolen to build this empire, and I made a special trip to celebrate the thieves. What am I doing here? What are any of us doing here? That's the place where Harry's wife seems to be stuck, in her own more intimate dance with that nation and its history. She's shocked to discover institutional racism in the very institution that created the most enduring business model for it. although she has, of course, latterly said there isn't any racism, and she's telling us about it a lot. And while I am Team Harry's wife, it's unpleasant, painful, and a bit irritating to watch her figure it out in real time. It's not the sadness of her response that's troubling, it's the surprise. Can you believe the police didn't protect me? Can you believe no one cared, though, that microaggressions endangered my emotional health? Can you believe all those strangers called me nasty names on the internet? Can you believe my white in-laws wouldn't stand up to racists who hurt me? Yes, I'm a black woman. Are you new here? And that's the problem. She is. Harry's wife is very new to being treated like she's black, and having to factor that into the way she lives her life. I don't mean that she didn't know racism was real or should be stopped. She's not Stacey Dash or anything. But Harry's wife's expectation that a system built on exploiting non-white people would protect her is naive in the extreme and a really bad luck. Harry's wife isn't just biracial or light-skinned. The reality is that she can, and clearly has, passed for white for her whole life. And that largely defined her racial experience and education before her engagement. The Netflix series lays it out clearly. Her mother, Doria Ragland, who is black, talks about how not black Harry's wife looked from the beginning, and how strangers assumed she was her daughter's nanny. That's a familiar story for anyone who is part of a black family with mixed-race people. But lots of biracial kids are clearly black and something else, but black like Barack Obama, or Halle Berry, or Lenny Kravitz. Not Harry's wife. The early episodes of the Netflix series included interviews with several people in Harry's wife's orbit who had no idea she was part black until she told them. There's no indication that she ever denied her heritage. It's just that she looked white enough that people assumed she was. And so the reality of racism that many black kids learn in grade school is something she just discovered in her 30s. But there were ways that she could have learned more. And it's disturbing that it seems Harry's wife never availed herself of them. Of all the childhood friends, classmates, and Girl Squad members who served as Harry's wife's character witnesses in the Netflix series, almost none of them were black. It's the norm for white people not to have black friends, and there's nothing that vouches for the whiteness of Harry's wife's world more that she didn't seem to have many either. At one point in the second episode of the series, Harry's wife talks about how being biracial meant she didn't feel like she fitted in anywhere, and proclaims, "People don't talk about what it's like to be mixed race. Tell me you don't have a black friend group without telling me you don't have a black friend group." The person I feel sorriest for in this whole mess is Ragland, who acknowledges and openly regrets that she didn't do enough to educate Harry's wife about racism. Well, we know the reason why that was. She wasn't around. Having to teach your kids how to survive systemic racism is an emotionally crushing reality for most black parents. There are all sorts of ways you can try to put it off. Move to the right neighbourhood, scout out the right schools, keep a very close eye on the books, movies and media your kid is exposed to. If you play your cards right, and having a daughter not a son can help, you might not have to start having the talk with your kids until middle school. But destiny dealt Harry's wife and her mum an option to pass on those hard conversations, and it's clear that they took it. And I understand and even empathise with Ragland's choice. If there were a magic wand or a random accident of genetics that would keep anti-blackness from shaping my kid's life, I might do the same. Had she not married Harry, Harry's wife might have spent her whole life as a conscious, progressive, almost white woman, an accomplished B-list actress and internet personality whose racial identity might have occasionally come up in celebrity little-known facts listicle, but nothing else. It seems like that was Harry's wife's choice, and that's the heart of my unease with her. At a certain point, you have to be responsible for filling in the gaps in your upbringing, or owning your decision not to. Harry's wife could have Googled racism in the British royal family, the way she Googled the words to God Save the Queen. Years before she met Harry, she could have cultivated friendships and relationships with black people who might have been able to disabuse her of some of the misguided expectations that a race would never really matter, but it seems she didn't. And of course, the reason that she didn't is because it wasn't worthwhile for her to do so. Her narcissism saw no need in doing it. Her narcissism only needed to utilize her blackness as a means of playing the victim. She's not interested in her black heritage. She's only interested in when it serves a purpose, and that's when it comes to playing the victim. Returning to the article. Harry's wife still has my sympathy, to a point. She has become an avatar for many black women like me who have lived through the pet-to-threat journey, women who believed pro-diversity pronouncements of white-led institutions where we studied or worked, or who thought that we were magical negresses who could guide them into a more enlightened future. It's humbling and humiliating to be confronted with your mistake, falling for the oldest okey-doke that white supremacist society has to offer. But while it's disappointing that the royal family turned out that way, it's hardly a surprise. Except to Harry's wife. And Harry's wife's persistent, breathless, tearful surprise about her experience, a shock that she expects the watching and now reading world to share, is the clearest indication that she's mainly speaking from a white perspective and to a white audience. There's not any corner of the diaspora where people would not have warned her, if she'd ever asked. I don't hate Harry's wife. I wish her a healthy and happy life with her devoted husband, with the safety that all families of all colours deserve. I don't think she should stop talking about her experience, but I also wish she'd think a little more of how she does. Now, of course, this journalist makes some valid points, and it's a balanced article considering the appropriate perspectives. She doesn't realise, of course, why it is Harry's wife hasn't considered the issue of her blackness and the racism that she might have endured. It's for the reasons that I pointed out. But what she does do, from a black perspective, is make it very clear that Harry's wife portrayed herself as white, has never considered her blackness previously, and how the writer wishes that she had done so. It's an honest appraisal of the way that Harry's wife behaves, and as a consequence of my work, you're also able to understand precisely why she has behaved this way. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.